Welcome to the 2024 Traveller Mayday Mayday event. I'm your host, Frank Succardi from CyborgPrime Games. I have with me today Mr. Joshua Bell of Travellermap. Hi, Joshua.
Hey, Frank, how's it going?
Pretty good. Thanks for joining us for this Mayday.
Happy to be here. Happy to answer some questions.
Great, great. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in the Traveller community.
Okay, so I'm Joshua Bell, and back in 2005-ish, I created a little thing called Travellermap, which is basically like Google Maps, but for the Traveller universe. Just a hobby project that I run, work on it in my spare time. I'm glad it's ended up being used by an awful lot of Traveller players out there. It's exactly what I made it for.
Cool. Do you actually have any numbers on that? Like how many hamburgers you've served?
I think there's several hundred users a day. I could bring up stats. Do that live. I'm overestimating. So between about 40 and 80 active users or distinct users every day.
All right,
So
cool,
not
cool.
a ton.
Well, hopefully we'll build some more awareness and load up your server real good. So
Great.
So for those who don't really know what, well, before we get into the Travellermap itself, give us a little idea of how you got involved in role-playing games to begin with.
Sure. Well, back in the early 80s, I was lucky enough to be going to a school that pretty early on discovered Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games. And that was just something that a lot of the students there happened to be interested in. And this is like circa 1981, 1982. And so people started, bringing Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games into school. Eventually, the administration of the school, said, "Hey, you need to stop playing," not because of any sort of moral panic, but just because the kids were playing it too much and not getting enough actual schoolwork done.
Very distracting.
So, yeah. So, I, bought a whole bunch of D&D supplements and issues of Dragon magazine, and some of my friends fell into Traveller, and I quickly got hooked on that as well. We were also incredibly lucky that very close to my school, just a couple blocks away, was what was then and continues to be now an absolutely amazing game store called the Sentry Box. And it's, if you go there today, it's in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It's gigantic rooms and rooms and rooms of role-playing games and board games and miniature games and war games and sci-fi and fantasy novels. It's huge. It was a little smaller back then, but it was easy to just, over lunchtime, just walk up there and look at, what's the latest issue of JTAS or Challenge that's come out. Ooh, there's a new Alien module out. And so I didn't actually end up playing much. I was definitely one of those, buy it, read it, explore the universe in my head sort of kids, but did play several games with classmates. And, I, over the years, let many of my, treasured childhood things go, but held on to my Traveller books. So some of the original classic edition, and especially loved the Alien modules. I really loved that universe building.
For folks who are used to D&D and as a D&D player, what would you say are the major differences between like world building in D&D and the world building in Traveller?
So at least my impression of D&D was, each module was its own self-contained universe. You had the same core ideas of, there are, fighters and magicians and thieves, and there are the standard, set of monsters. But each adventure was, you start off in random tavern and you go to random dungeon. And so there wasn't a sense of I'm exploring this universe. And although Traveller could be played that way, more often than not, it's using the OTU, the official Traveller universe. And I really loved that. I mean, just like I read and devoured various science fiction or fantasy book series as a kid, Traveller was like that as well. Like every new module that I picked up was revealing some secret of the Traveller universe or digging into one new alien species. And so I really loved that sense of I'm exploring and learning more about this. Whereas the D&D modules, it's cool to run through an adventure, but it's not contributing to this larger story.
Right, I see. That just made me think. In Traveller you have these disparate types of like planets and things, and the modules are kind of standalone, but that's the nature of Traveller. You can just plop them in, and they seem like it's not disjointed. It's what am I trying to say? It's like modularly fits into the like Traveller setting, whereas the D&D ones are more like you're saying, like maybe disjointed, and they don't have an overall like background setting that binds them together.
Yeah.
So it's the lore. You're attracted to the lore a lot in
I'm
Traveller.
attracted to the lore. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's fast forward a bit to when did you decide the world needed a Travellermap program?
It was a very, very lucky confluence of several things. I literally had not thought about Traveller in, I don't know, maybe 15 years, and was at a half-price bookstore up in the Seattle area where I was living at the time, and ran across a copy of GURPS Traveller. They had the core rule book there. And I'm like, oh, hey, this is cool. I haven't thought about Traveller in forever, and picked it up. I really like what the GURPS folks did with presenting the rules and the setting all together in one book, and going the original GDW books. I do appreciate their sort of clarity and austerity, but I also think the GURPS ones did a good job of adding illustrations and making it a little bit more approachable. And one thing that stood out in there was a mock-up of the classic map of the Imperium poster that shows all of charted space at a very high level, so you can see the different empires. And they framed it with a fake computer interface with like zoom in and scroll buttons on the side. And I'm like, hey, that's cool. And right about that same time, so this is 2005, Google Maps had come out. And if you don't remember the web before Google Maps, there were map sites, but they'd show a rectangle of the world, and you could click and wait, and then it would load the zoomed in version, and then you could click an arrow on the side and wait, and it would load the next area over. And they worked, but Google Maps was pretty revolutionary, where you just flick your mouse to zoom in, drag the map around in any direction. And that was so cool. And also at the time, although my background from the 90s was actually doing some web development, I hadn't been doing that for many years. And I was looking for a web project to do. Like what's the latest in browser technology and web server technology. And so those three things came together. This idea of, well, there's this cool way to do a map, could do one for Traveller, and I need a web project to work on. And there were existing online maps for Traveller sectors, but they, again, were what older style Earth maps were like on the web, where they'd show a view of all of space, and you could click and it would zoom into one sector, and then you click and you could zoom in to just a subsector, and then click, zoom into a world. And I thought, hey, this would be fun. The data's there. There are other people who've done the work of starting to collect the data for this Traveller universe. I could just write the code to render it and write all the web page JavaScript to make it as interactive as Google Maps. So I did it.
Awesome. And how did you? What's the technology stack?
So at the time, I was doing a lot of work with Windows operating system, and Microsoft had a web server called Internet Information Server, IIS, and a programming language and technology for that called ASP.NET. Details aren't important. And a programming language
active
called
server
C#.
pages. Mm-hmm.
Active server pages, yeah. Basic idea is that you could, instead of writing the server or having the server just be a collection of files that get served, you could make the server be a program. And that was very similar to what I'd been doing as a software engineer, which is, you don't think about that I've got a web page requesting data from a server. Think of it, I've got an application, and parts of the application are running locally in the web browser, and other parts of the application are running on the server. And it's just a matter of having those bits communicate. So the bits running on the server, it's basically an application written in the C# programming language that loads up all of the data for charted space, and then waits for a web browser somewhere out on the internet to ask it for pieces of a map. And then on the client side, what you load in the browser, it's an HTML page that describes, here's it's black, here's the options along the side, there's a little logo in the bottom, and then some JavaScript or code that runs in the browser. And it just knows, oh, you're looking at this chunk of space, so I need to ask the server to give me these images, these image tiles that make up part of the map. And as you scroll around, it just updates your location and says, okay, server, now give me these tiles. And it stitches them together on the screen.
Very cool.
And
super cool. And so how did you initially seed that information, like planetary information into that?
so the best thing, the easiest thing about this is Traveller was written and designed by geeks for geeks. So yeah. So one of the things I remember from those magazines that I picked up at the gaming store were articles by Mark Miller that were programs that you could type into your Apple II computer, which I had, that would generate sectors. And that was because the whole notion of Traveller's UWP, or Universal World Profile, is it's like a database entry, a standard compact form that describes a world. And so you look at those old supplements going back to the late 70s, early 80s that describe sectors. And they're basically a database of, here's the world name, here's the world stats, here's some additional remarks about it, all in a standard form. And how are those generated? Well, at first by hand, by rolling dice, but pretty quickly, the folks at GDW and then later on at Digest Group were using computers to generate these sectors. And there were versions that the Digest Group folks put on early bulletin board systems. Now, there's one called Genie, and they uploaded the data that they were using. And so since those days in the 80s and 90s, up until the 2000s, there were lots of places online where there was like a server you could download files for a bunch of sectors. And reasonably easy to parse that data. There would be files that use data in different ways or were slightly incompatible. but it was pretty easy to just get, here's the data for the Spinward Marches and the Soleimani Rim and some adjacent sectors. Lots of gaps, lots of holes. Not all of them were for the same era, but I was able to use those to bootstrap and get things
So,
rendering hex maps pretty quickly.
so did you start out with the Spinward Marches first, or was there? I mean, was that like the source that of the most fruitful amount of material, or did you decide on starting with Earth sector, or like some? How'd you go about deciding what was
Uh,
going to be like the first part of the map that
it was
gets converted?
actually pretty easy to go from. So the very first thing that I did was just draw a circle, which you think, hey, that's pretty simple. But if you go back to how is the web page talking to the server, that circle is actually going to be split across multiple different image tiles. But once you're able to say, give me these 4 image tiles and assemble them correctly, and you've got a circle showing up, then it's just a matter of, okay, now how do I draw hexes? And now how do I draw the stuff in the hexes? And going from, I can draw a hex that has a world in it to thousands of hexes with thousands of worlds is actually pretty easy, because that's what computers are good at, doing the same dumb thing over and over and over and over and over
You,
again.
you make like a
So
template for the first one, and then you can kind of.
yeah, basically there's, the way that the system works is there's one file that describes all of space for a particular year. So say 1105 on the imperial calendar, and it just says, this box, Spinward Marches, look in this file. This box, Deneb, look in this file. This box, Corridor, look in this file. And then as long as I had those files and I could link them all together, then that was it. It just zips across there and says, okay, this rectangle of space, you're looking at half of this one subsector in the Spinward Marches and half of this other subsector in Deneb. Great. It just starts drawing all of the little hexes that happen to fit inside that box.
Super cool. And so, how did it kind of evolve from what it was to what it is now? Because like it has a fractal landscape generator and all kinds of cool stuff. How does it? Well, I guess what I want to say like is if I go to that planet again, is that going to have the same seed for that landscape?
Well, so one thing I should call out is that Planetary map generator is actually on a different site. The Travellermap actually has sort of 2 components to it. There's the part that you interact with as a user, where you're zooming in on part of the map and clicking on it, and it's showing you world or sector data. But then it's also got a way for other websites or other computer programs to ask Travellermap.com for data. So if you actually drill in to a particular world, I'm playing with it live here, so let me pick one. Okay, I'll go to Tari, which is right next to Land. And if you scroll down through you click on it, scroll down through the information box, it's got a generate world map link. And that actually takes you to a different site called Traveller Worlds. And the way it works is that other site gets passed the data about that world that you clicked on. So Travellermap told the other site, hey, here's this world, here's its information. And that other site then decides what to do with it.
Is it just passing the UWP?
World WP, some of the other system information, and so on. And it generates it. That other site called Traveller Worlds is by another engineer named Jonathan Sherlock. And you asked, like, is it going to be the same map every time? Yes, because for links from Travellermap to that site, it always uses the same seed. So basically, it will roll the same numbers every time when it's doing the fractal generation.
Awesome.
You as a user can go in and choose different numbers. You can use the site to build worlds and star systems that don't show up on Travellermap at all. But this was one of the things that I really wanted to do when I was building Travellermap, is make it not just a service for users, but something that other developers could make their sites and their applications interact with.
It's super well done. Did you have a lot of feedback from the community about like what they wanted to see in there, or features that they wanted you to add or anything like that?
Yeah, so definitely over time, lots and lots of feature requests, things that have gone in, bug reports, things that I fixed. Yeah, the things like being able to search and do routes between worlds, that was a feature request that took a fair amount of engineering to do and tweak it and get it right. And yeah, I think the bulk of the work that I've done in terms of people asking for things is when they've got sectors that they've created that are either just unofficial parts of the universe, like when you've gone a little bit beyond charted space, or maybe there's a part of charted space that we know the name of the sector and where it is, and maybe a little bit about who lives there, but nobody's given the details for it. So people can submit those, and I can add them basically to the database. Or they're designing their own sectors for their own campaigns that have nothing to do with charted space, nothing to do with the Imperium, and I can add those as well. It's not self-service like a wiki. People have to email me the files, and I have to do a little bit of work, but it's pretty straightforward. And then,
Like you look for duplicate names and stuff, or like what kind of like cleaning has to be done for with the new data?
oh, duplicate names are there.
Oh, there's
I mean,
duplicate. Okay.
Spinward Marches has duplicate names,
Oh,
multiple duplicate names, so
okay.
that's fine. Yeah. The make sure that there are no like errors in the data files,
Oh.
like the things are in the right columns, and even then, the site is pretty lenient. It's got data checkers, so I can just paste a file into a form and it'll look for errors for me. And two classes of errors. One of the things that we do with the site is after a few years after I put it up, um, people working with Mark Miller reached out to me about putting up the official data on the site, which was, that was amazing, going from, hey, it's just this thing that I built, to now it's hosting the official data. And so when official data is being added, we want to check and make sure it's conforming to the Traveller rules, that it really doesn't have any glitches in it. If there's a world that's under military rule, the UWP identifies what other world is in control of it, for example. And so the data checker can be fairly strict. But if you're using the site to build your own map, or you're uploading completely custom sectors, you don't actually have to make it perfect. It'll just call out if there's some egregious error, like you left off half the UWP or something like that.
Gotcha. Now, I noticed that the Travellermap has like 7 or 8 different like view modes. That lets you simulate like, or display it as like an old style traveler map, or mongoose map, different kinds of layouts. I think that's super cool. Also, like the perspective view, that's pretty cool. What other interesting features does Travellermap have that you get feedback on?
One that's been a lot of fun is the experiments. So if you use the menu in the upper right, there's a tab that has like a Erlenmeyer flask icon. And if you open that up, it lets you turn on different overlays for the site. So the first one is importance, and that will render worlds with what importance is a Traveller 5 concept, but you don't have to be using Traveller 5 rules. It basically just combines a lot of the characteristics, like what's the population, what's the tech level, and things like that, and can determine, is this world actually a mover and a shaker in the sector? So
Gotcha.
sector capitals tend to be pretty important. And so, you can figure that out yourself by looking at the UWP, but if you turn on the importance overlay, at a glance, you can see, oh, that's a backwater. No, these are the important worlds. And that can be useful if
Mm-hmm.
you're charting out, like, where should trade routes go or where should communication routes go. There's population, which is similar. And that can be really eye-opening when you look at a sector and you realize that this one world has a greater population than the whole rest of the subsector put together, and it makes you think about trade and travel and things like that. And there's a bunch of other overlays that you can put up, like what worlds are identified as ancient sites. One that I enjoyed putting together is one that replaces the world rendering and instead shows you the stars. So if most stars in our galaxy are little red dwarf stars, or for Traveller, there are a few more of the sort of our orange dwarf star. But then every once in a while, there's big white giant star or red giant star, and
Oh,
lots of stars
cool.
have companions,
Yeah, I'm looking
and
at
it
that now. Very
renders all
cool.
of those.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't know that.
yeah.
Interesting.
So
Wow. Very
that was a
cool.
lot of fun.
Huh.
I have to say one thing about when you use those sorts of views and you zoom out, you can really see that different sectors were designed by different people at different times using different rules or different system creation logic.
Because of the
Because very
distribution.
often, yeah, you'll
Yeah.
see like one sector, whoa, that's got a lot of bright white stars in it, compared to the next one, which is mostly the stars are orange and red with just a few bright white stars. So that's something
Huh.
we, may try to clean up over time. We're not afraid to change the data as long as it's not going to basically render published adventures invalid.
Right.
But it's also a lot of work, and everyone involved in this is a volunteer. So
It's
may or
so
may not ever
cool.
happen.
It's fast and it's I mean, considering the amount of data that's in there, it's pretty damn fast. And boy, being able to turn on all these extra features is pretty cool. And then you can also select what milieu the map represents. It looks like you got like 10 different eras.
Yeah. So
6,
the
7,
the
8.
default, the golden age for Traveller is like somewhere between 1105 and 1115. The classic Traveller era. Those are the books that I bought back in the day. I've explored the other eras since then, but that's the default setting for classic Traveller, Mongoose, and so on. Originally, like when I first put up the site, I was using a lot of files from all sorts of different eras and times, and gradually tried to clean those up and separate them out. But yeah, you can pick a different era. There's the most of the focus has been on that golden age 1105 data. Some people have contributed files for other eras, like the Rebellion 1120. A bunch of the digest group data is from that era. And there was some new era work. If you go to another era, you'll probably find a handful of sectors that have full data. So you'll see the borders, you'll see UWPs and worlds. If we don't have data for a particular sector in a particular era, you'll just get placeholders. Like we know in 1105 there's a star there, so we'll indicate there's a star there. You just won't get any data about it in that era.
Gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, I'm looking at the planetary details, and it's pretty awesome. Lots of good information there. Another cool thing is the showing other what's in range of different jump levels. So, like if you're on a certain planet and you're like, well, we've got jump 2. Where can we go? So you can highlight that planet and then click the jump 2, and you'll just get an isolated image of everything that's within range of your, jump 2 ship. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I really wanted to make tools that made it useful for referees and players.
Mm-hmm.
So, it'll show the UWP, which, some of us can read, but it also, you can expand and it'll decode it. And then, yeah, you can, from a world, you can, hit a print button and it'll generate a printable version that summarizes what I thought was the most important stuff about the world, with the idea that someone could print that out and use it in a game.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So, do you have any plans for expansion on this, or like other kind of ideas on how it could be useful going forward?
Uh, no shortage of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a matter of time and priorities.
Gotcha.
So I would say that no project is ever done. I think this one is, every new thing that has to go in really needs to earn its keep, as it were. Like if I add one more button, that makes the other buttons harder to discover and harder to find.
Right.
So I'll look
Right.
at things, carefully over time.
It's
Um,
super well organized. Yeah, I think you did a really great job. Kudos.
Thank you, thank
Mm-hmm.
you.
I've seen a lot of appreciation for this also online in the various forums on Facebook and stuff like that. People really appreciate this, referees and players alike. Um, what was one of the biggest, like, most difficult aspects of this project?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what's a really interesting story like that. In no particular order, uh, hexagons are a pain. Uh, like we're all of the math that we learn in school is about a nice, Cartesian square grid coordinate system. Hexagons look really nice, but they'll warp your mind if you think about it too long. Like a simple thing is hexagons on a hex map like Traveller pack tighter vertically than horizontally. So if you're trying to do the math around how far apart are some things on a map like Travellermap, um, if two things are in the same vertical column and they're that distance, you can pack more hexes in than if your ruler is tipped 90 degrees. And so the little details around what's the horizontal scale or vertical scale end up, it's pretty straightforward geometry, but you have to actually think. Um, and so, like if on the Travellermap site, down in the lower right corner, there's a scale indicator of like how many parsecs fit on the screen. That is kind of a lie. I think it's using the horizontal scale, but if it was using the vertical scale, it'd be wrong. So that's one issue. Another is computers don't deal with numbers the same way humans do. Is another one. When you have a decimal number, which in computer jargon we call floating point, um, they work for most things really easily, but you can store really accurate numbers like 1.234567889. That's great. You can store very large numbers, you know, 10 to the 40th power, no problem. You can store very small numbers. But when you combine very small numbers and very large numbers, you lose precision. And that actually shows up in Travellermap. If you go away from charted space far enough and start zooming in, you can actually end up seeing bugs in how Travellermap renders things. And the reason for that is Travellermap has the origin, the 0, 0 coordinates for dead center in charted space. And so numbers for anything near charted space or coordinates for anything near charted space, the computer has no problem with that. But if you go several hundred sectors away, and you're trying to figure out, okay, I want to put this rectangular tile and this rectangular tile next to each other, you're gonna find out they don't quite fit. There end up being little gaps between them. And fortunately, almost nobody runs into that because nobody's looking at sectors that far away from charted space because there's no data in them. But that does mean if somebody says, hey, can I invent a sector that's on the other side of the galaxy? I have to say no, because it doesn't quite work with the code that I've got written. There's
Gotcha.
almost certainly a way to solve it, but it's a practical thing. Am I going to spend a lot of time on it if it's not really bothering anybody, or could I invest my time elsewhere? I'm going to invest my time elsewhere.
How do so do you let people add their own traveler subsectors to this master map as long as it's far away or whatever?
Yeah,
Okay.
and Faraway is actually the term that I use. If people are submitting their own data, I kind of think of it in two different ways. One is, are you making it an unofficial addition to the Traveller universe? Like, given a sufficiently fast ship and enough time, could you actually fly there from capital? Yes, okay, great. I will put it somewhere near charted space. Maybe it's somewhere along the Jordani core route. Maybe it's towards the rim. And there's a handful of those scattered around charted space. But if what you're proposing is no, this is my own universe. This has nothing to do with the official Traveller universe. Nothing to do with charted space. It's my own campaign. Maybe it's alternate Earth, alternate timeline. Maybe it's an alternate Spinward Marches, but if something else had happened in history. I will put those in the map. Now, technically, kind of like different times, you can imagine those are like different parallel universes. And so the correct way to handle those there'd be another dimension on the options on the site where you could say, not only do I want the Spinward Marches in 1105, but I want the version that was published in this book, or I want a different
the
version of
mirror
the
world.
Beyond. Exactly.
Right.
Or Earth, but in some completely different science fiction universe. That would be ideal. That would also make the UI cluttered for something that most people aren't using. So what I do is I just stick those way far away from the Imperium. And call them faraway sectors.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you can find them in the search box using the search box. You don't have to tweak any UI in order for them to show up. So it's both user convenience and me being lazy. And yeah, people do have to reach out to me. There's in the menu on the site, if you click on the information or question mark, there's an option called custom data and submissions that tells you how to both create data and just use the map to generate like posters and booklets and things like that, but also how to submit data that you want. And literally it's email me the files. The volume has been low enough that I can keep up with it.
I see. Cool. Super cool. Maybe I'll submit my little subsector. We'll see. Huh. Very cool. So, do you have any major expansion plans, or just gonna let it cook for a while?
Letting it cook for a while.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't really see anymore. You packed so much stuff in here, and it's really well organized and super easy to use. Clean interface. It's great.
Yeah. I'd love to hear ideas from users. It's all open source, so other people are able to just grab the source, and it does require being a software engineer to get it up and running. There are instructions in the source code, but other people can get it up and running and would be welcome to submit additions or discuss helping out. To that point, the the biggest thing that I need to do to the site is, this sounds like a big deal. Sort of is and sort of isn't, which is rewrite it. Now, before, like, why do you need to rewrite it? The technology that I used for the server side of things is very much that ASP.NET C# is very much a product of the early 2000s. The site works just fine, but it's using, like, literally the way that it draws pixels into the images that it sends is something that was designed for Windows computers in the early 2000s. It's not the best way to do it on modern hardware and modern operating systems. And so I need to basically swap out the engine underneath the car. And that would also let me move from how it's currently running on a couple of hosted computers to being more able to be distributed across more machines. And that's, would require not insignificant amount of work. The hardest thing is basically bootstrapping that. The site works fine, just fine right now. So it's investing a bunch of time and not actually getting anything out as a tangible benefit. And that's definitely far away from my day job. So I'm not an expert in what are the best server technologies to use. And the site's also a little quirky in the sense that it uses a lot of data to render images. And not many sites do that. They want to be serving up existing images, not actually rendering a bunch of hexagons thousands of times a second. And so there are pieces of technology for running on servers and rendering images, but it turns out not a lot of sites use those. So there's not a one true way of doing this.
Gotcha.
So that's the big thing that I need to do. When am I going to get around to it? I don't know.
Is this available on Git or something, or how do people access the open source information?
So the source is all up on GitHub. Again, if you go to the site, click on the menu, it's down there with a link that explains the APIs if you want to build an app that works with Travellermap, or get the source code. I'll put a plea out there that if somebody's interested in contributing, try getting it up and running. And if you can do that, then reach out, and I'm happy to describe in more detail, like, yeah, this is what we should be exploring in terms of updating the server technology.
All right, cool. So people should come at this with a little bit of experience, because you're not going to train them, but you'll be happy to onboard them if they can get to a certain level. Sounds like.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Hey, what's your favorite edition of Traveller?
Oh, hard to beat classic Traveller, just because that's what I grew up with, and all those glorious adventures and the alien modules. There are pieces that I appreciate about every edition. Like I mentioned, GURPS Traveller, I think, doing a really good job of explaining the universe. I really like the sidebar style format, where you'd have the rules, you'd have the adventure described, and then on the side there'd be a little additional extra commentary, and I really liked that. And then it just comes down to which edition is, whether it's the setting provided by the edition or the set of rules, and it's all good.
Do you have a favorite Traveller career that you like to play?
Probably wouldn't surprise people out there that it's Scouts.
The
going off and exploring a new sector, new subsector, new worlds. I'm sort of doing that by creating Travellermap. It's my opportunity to explore new locations.
Yeah, cool. How do you reconcile things that don't seem to go together on a planet, like a high population, but like, you know, a hostile environment.
There's always a way to make it work. You know, that in that particular example, it's like giant arcologies. Typical example. You know, just get creative.
That's my advice too. Maybe it's low tech now, but it was high tech before, or maybe there was a lot of people, but some sort of catastrophe happened, and there's still the same amount of people, but now, you know.
Yeah, and don't assume that it's all humans. I mean, you know, they could be, you know, intelligent termites.
True.
Can live in giant cities underground, packed super dense, and do it all low tech.
Good point. The termite
creatures
people.
that can live in a near vacuum.
Good point.
Something
Good
like
point. I'm very humanocentric, so I don't even, my brain doesn't even go there. But that's those are all great ideas. Mm-hmm. All right. Go on.
I was going to say that's also something that I almost feel bad about Travellermap in that, you know, it makes it easy for everybody to like, yep, here's the Imperium. You can explore every world in the Imperium. I really hope people don't feel that constrains them. There's no reason you need to use the official Traveller universe. Feel free to use any setting you want. I've only got the OTU or similar things up on Travellermap, but it can generate maps and booklets and things for your own data, your own worlds. And then there's nothing saying you have to actually use the data as presented. And there are also lots of gaps in the data. Like some worlds and some sectors will tell you if the main world is a satellite of a gas giant, but most sectors aren't tagged that way. So basically, it's just not written down for most sectors whether a world is a satellite of a gas giant or not. Similarly, most of the worlds don't tell you if the population is predominantly human or not. Some do, because when that sector was being generated or described in the book, the authors provided that level of detail. But in most cases, they don't. Doesn't mean you shouldn't, even if you want to conform to the OTU, don't assume that you're getting all of the data out.
Right. And sometimes, you know, like the randomly generated planet, if you can't fit it, like you say, you can fudge a number. Maybe it just works better with one of the digits changed. You know, so scrutinize that. You know, this planet is blech, except if I change this right here, now it all magically works. Because really, well, for me, my favorite saying recently is, "Damn it, Jim, I'm a role-playing game, not an astrophysics simulation." And so I'm trying to, you know, spread that around because, you know, there's only so much you can simulate in a game and on a chart with 15 entries and things like that. So you just got to pick what seems right and go with it. And if that doesn't work, fake it till you make it. Just try different things and see what works.
Absolutely. And, you know, as much as I say scouts is my preferred profession, I don't think those scouts are really good at taking records. They make mistakes on the data all over the place. So don't trust it.
That's another good point. All right. Do you have any like Discord server or social media, any place people can find and access you, or is it all done by email?
Email's probably the easiest. I mean, I've been on the socials here and there. Travellermap has a Mastodon account. I'm on Facebook and things like that. But email is going to be the easiest. You know, if you're needing help with the site, it's probably faster to ask other Traveller players, other users of the site, rather than asking me.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be shy about reaching out, but yeah, email is probably the easiest.
Give me the how do people get to Travellermap?
It's really difficult. Travellermap.com.
So easy. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And if I one plug though
Yeah.
is that it works great on mobile browsers. So if you've got an iPhone or Android, pull up the browser on there, punch in travellermap.com, and automatically adapts down to that small form factor. And mobile browsers also let you install websites as apps, like add it to your home screen,
Oh yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
it'll run full screen there. So you can keep Traveller Map in your pocket.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great idea. Something to do on the bus or train to keep your brain going, or while you're in jump space. To get
Yeah, it does require a network connection. Doesn't work
yeah.
offline.
So we're so
Yeah,
good in
sorry
jump
about
space.
that.
Yeah. All right. Great.
No.
All right. Okay. Well, thanks again for joining us. My guest today has been Joshua Bell, creator of Travellermap. So come on over to travellermap.com and explore the travel worlds, the multitude of travel worlds there with us. Thanks again, Josh, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Happy Mayday, everyone.
Until next time, my friends, happy traveling. Don't fly solo through the galaxy. Click like to join our alliance. Subscribe for your crew pass, and enable notifications to never miss an encounter. This journey is fueled by my patrons. Thank you, patrons. Feel the thrill of discovery. Become a patron and join the adventure.